Do you guys remember the color of the ribbons we used to get at track meets back in the day? I bet you know what they are. Blue was first, red was second, white was third. I think years later they added a green for fourth, which was right before the self-esteem movement came in. And that's what I want to talk to you about today in this walk and talk. Hi everyone, welcome back to this Saturday's walk and talk, where we're going to dive into the self-esteem movement and the damage it's done to our kids. I know this is going to be a bit controversial because some parents and some people think rewards and always telling kids they're great, even when they fail, is super important. But it does a lot of damage, and it has done a lot of damage to our kids. And I'm not saying that we can't use rewards and praise for kids when it's necessary. Rewards and punishment are timely strategies for behavior. They build momentum. They help you nudge a kid along to do the right thing and to work harder and just to be better kids. They're not something that should be overused. And that's what the self-esteem movement did. Kids started getting participation ribbons for everything. No one fails, no one loses. It was kind. It created emotional stability. For today, I want to talk about the damage we do as parents when we live in this world of praise, where we live in this world of participation ribbons for everything you do, and how it causes kids to be put in a position where they're unable to cope with losing, or to cope when something doesn't go their way. You know, some of the things that kids absorbed from the self-esteem movement are that if something feels hard, I'm not good enough. If I'm frustrated, I should stop. If I don't succeed right away, I must not be good at this. If I lose, it means I failed and I'm not learning. You know, as parents, we didn't say these things out loud. But what we have to understand is that our nervous systems, our kids' nervous systems, learn from patterns, learn from repetition. So here's the emotional piece. When our kids experience frustration without getting the reps in, when their heart rate spikes, their thinking is going to narrow. So go back to what I said about the amygdala and the fight, flight, and freeze response, and how when your heart rate increases and you don't take those deep breaths, your mind narrows and you go into panic mode. And that's what the self-esteem movement created, which also led to gentle parenting, but that's a whole nother walk and talk, which I'm going to do. You know, and like I mentioned in the previous video in entitlement, when we see kids reacting this way, where they get anxious, they melt down, they get frustrated, they start crying, we tend to label that as entitlement. But the truth is we've set that up because we haven't taught them grit. We haven't taught them to persevere because we're constantly rewarding them for everything. The self-esteem movement came in and asked us as parents to constantly use positive reinforcement all the time. And which is great. Positive reinforcement is not a bad thing. But again, like I mentioned earlier, you got to pick your spots with it. Just like you have to pick your spots when it comes to constructive criticism or that negative reinforcement. There's a time and a place, and you use it for momentum to get kids to do the right thing. So when we see kids react because their nervous system goes haywire and their amygdala gets hijacked, it's because they've not had those repetitions to develop that grit. So I want to talk to you really quickly, or just mention a name. So pause the video and write this name down. Angela Duckworth. She is the champion of grit. And as a parent, as a teacher, lots of teachers already know about Angela Duckworth. Stop, go on YouTube, search her and listen to her TED Talks or her podcasts that she's on or lectures that she does around grit. So what she explains is that confidence, which comes from, you know, overhype, over praising our kids, like we try to make them feel confident and enhance their ego, and our kids assume, and the self-esteem movement thought or assumed that the more confident speak you gave to your kids, the stronger and more resilient they would come. But in fact, that's incorrect, because that was just talk. And because there was no physical boundaries to them gaining success, or mental boundaries to them gaining success, because they're told they're great all the time, we ended up with a group of kids that were entitled and can't handle the pressure. Which goes back to, you see it a lot on sports teams. You see it a lot with kids who leave high school and they go to college and they crack under the pressure because college professors don't have time for it. Whereas in high school, we baby kids a little bit more. So Angela Duckworth basically says that kids don't get stronger from praise. They get stronger from feeling failure. They get stronger by persevering daily, constantly. And that's why when I talk about school as being a place where kids need to feel that discomfort, it's super important to understand that discomfort leads to grit. It leads to perseverance. And so when kids are in a state of discomfort and they learn, eventually that discomfort goes away. And then our job is to push that line a little bit further the next time so they get back into a state of discomfort so they can learn. And then when they master that discomfort and they learn how to soothe their amygdala and they learn to either get better at sports or academically, they get stronger and stronger and stronger. And that's how grit develops. I read an article the other day that this generation of kids is the first generation that isn't going to outperform their parents. They're not going to be smarter than their parents. They're not going to work harder than their parents because they haven't had to. Because we've set them up into this world where they get a participation ribbon for everything, where they get praised for everything, and so they don't have to work as hard. But think about that for a second. Every single generation, my generation, your generation, we progressed further than our parents ever did. And this generation is the first generation that's not outperforming us. And there are exceptions to the rules, of course. Hopefully my kids will outperform me, because God knows eventually they're going to have to take me in, because I'm getting old. Evie and Cruz, that's an expectation. Go make some money so you can take care of your old man. Another name that I want you to write down and go and research, or go search on YouTube or Google or AI, is Barbara Coloroso. Now she's from the 70s and 80s school of kids having to learn through experience. I'll use a really easy example. It's cold outside, your kid refuses to put a jacket on. You remind them, you ask them, they still refuse to do it. Her school of thought is let them go outside and be cold, because they'll learn in a hell of a hurry that they should have put their jacket on. The other thing, an example she would talk about is a baby learning to crawl or stand up, and you see a baby kind of struggling to crawl up onto the couch, to pull themselves up on the couch, and the first instinct for a parent is to lift them up and help them. But what she says is don't help them. Let them struggle. Maybe give them a little pat on the bottom to kind of give them a little momentum, but you get out of the way. And that's that natural struggle that kids develop, that grit and perseverance. So between Barbara Coloroso and Angela Duckworth, those two talk about kids needing to develop those emotional patterns of struggle so that they become more successful in life and they don't melt down when they don't make a team or they don't win a prize or get an award. And that's where we're at in society nowadays, is we're in this place where our kids think they should get everything because of the self-esteem movement. So for those of you who are pro self-esteem movement or in schools, pro positive behavior systems, the PBS system, you need to give your head a shake, because yes, they serve a purpose. Because I have in my school, I brag about my school a little bit. Might be a little stitch coming here where I talk to my kids, my basketball players, about losing a basketball game on a Wednesday, and I talk to them about pouting, sucking it up if they lose, and working harder the next week. I think I might throw the video in here. Basketball players, if you start to lose, are you going to pout? Are you going to whine? Are you going to have a temper tantrum? No, you're going to take deep breaths and calm yourselves. And then if you lose, you're going to come back the next week and practice harder and try to beat that team so you don't lose. Losing is a part of growing up. So basketball players, do not let your anger or frustration take over this Wednesday. Capiche? Okay. Good luck the rest of the week. But one thing I do is when my kids when our kids do behave or they do work hard, we do throw in some positive reinforcement. We will recognize them with a certificate or an award, but we do it after they've earned it. They don't get it for everything they do. And every week, my whole school could get an award because our kids are so awesome and they work hard and, you know, they're doing the right thing and they're being friendly and compassionate and empathetic and good friends and they're helping in the kitchen, helping their teachers. But guess what? Every week we only recognize 7 or 8 kids out of 100 or so, right? And the kids don't get upset if they don't get recognized. They just know they got to keep working hard and eventually they will get recognized. And that's the pattern that we need to try to develop and bring back into our school systems and into our households, because like I mentioned in my earlier video, we've got this generation of kids who are entitled because of the self-esteem movement, because of gentle parenting. So you're probably wondering, okay, well, what can I do instead of praising my kids? What can I do? What's the strategy? So what can you do as a parent to separate yourself from this world of praise and constantly providing your kids with accolades and participation ribbons? It's very simple, actually. What you want to do is you want to move away from evaluative praise, where you're evaluating your kid by saying, great job, awesome, you did it, yay, to descriptive feedback. You want to get to a place where you're saying, hey, I noticed you stayed in that even when you got frustrated. That is awesome work. You know what I loved? You didn't win, but you didn't quit. That's my favorite one. I love it when kids don't quit. Another thing you can say is, hey, I noticed that you tried a whole bunch of different ways to try to figure out that problem. What worked best for you? How are you going to do it next time? And do you think you can build on that or think differently? And for teachers, these are the core competencies. That's that creative and critical thinking, right? We develop that with descriptive feedback. So parents, just so you know, we use descriptive feedback in school because we want to develop those emotional intelligences, which I've talked about in previous videos. And that's a connection. You know, another thing you can say is, man, that looked really uncomfortable. You look like that was gonna blow your mind and you stuck with it. Great job. I'm proud of you for sticking with that. So there's that descriptive feedback. Those are just a few examples. And the more descriptive feedback you use, the more often you use it as a parent, the more they're going to develop that pattern. And so will you. I know it's going to be hard because it's easy to say, yay, great job, Johnny. But instead, if you start getting descriptive around working hard, around persevering, your kids are going to develop that pattern and they're going to internalize it and their nervous system's going to be able to handle it. And the same will be for you. As a parent, you're going to get used to talking like that and it's going to be easier to say and do. You know, just a reminder, you want to co-regulate. If your kids are melting down, if they're crying because they lost, if they're having temper tantrums because it didn't go their way, that's where you have to co-regulate. That's where you have to help them take deep breaths, soothe their amygdala so they can get to a place where their prefrontal cortex takes over and they can think. And then that's when you come in with some descriptive feedback and you talk about it, but make sure they're soothed first, right? So we're going to have to go through an era where we're going to have to do a lot of co-regulation because clearly the self-esteem movement put us in a position as parents where we've got to work through this stuff with our kids until we can get back to being a little more traditional. And by traditional, I don't mean going back to what we were raised as Gen Xers. I mean picking the best of how we were raised and getting rid of the bad and incorporating some of the new. You know, it's all in doses. Rewards, punishment, emotions, you use them to build a momentum. You don't use them to hurt. You use them to help your kids grow because we want our kids to have a growth mindset. The things that I want to explain and have you guys think about is the medicine wheel and the indigenous teaching around balance. Ultimately, what we want is we want balanced kids. We want them to be mentally strong, physically strong, emotionally strong, and spiritually strong. And by spiritually, I'm not a religious person, and I don't want to get into that either because that's political, but it's about purpose. Spiritual is what's your purpose? What are you all about? What do you stand for? Where's your moral compass? And so that's what we want to do is we're trying to accomplish this task of having kids who are balanced so they can be successful in life, be in line with who you are as a family and who they are as people and what we want in society. So on that note, I hope you learned something. Until next time, my friends, peace out.